Welcome to the second season of the Novitas podcast. I'm so excited to start this season after the launch of the second issue of the Novitas magazine. Novitas is all about sharing stories of post-capitalism. Stories from everyday people, some of my favorite people, that are finding different ways to live outside our current cultural paradigm that places the capitalist economic system squarely at the center of our social and economic lives. This episode welcomes Aviva Davis. Aviva is an artist and writer living in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, who shared a piece in the magazine titled "Why I Won't Drive a Car." Aviva's article breaks down the historical shift from active or public transportation to our current obsession with car culture. In this episode, we talk about how this car culture is harmful not just to the environment, but also to ourselves. We explore our own experiences living with the intentional choice to not drive a car and how it impacts our lives and our perspectives of the world around us. I hope you'll enjoy the conversation. Hi, Aviva. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is our first episode of season 2 of the Novitas podcast, because we just came out with the second issue of the Novitas magazine, which I'm so excited about. It came out so beautifully and had so many wonderful contributors, and you were the first article in the magazine, so that means you get to be first on the podcast as well.
Oh, awesome. I know I still really need to pick up a copy. I'm very excited to open it up and feel it in my hands.
Yes, so your article, "Why I Won't Drive a Car," and this was based off a zine that you had written previously, right?
Yeah.
What inspired you to write a zine about not driving a car?
Yeah, so I'll give a bit of a backstory. I'm originally from Winnipeg, which is, I would say, a pretty car-centric city, and then moved to Toronto when I was in about 10 years old. So I mainly, my teenage years is, when you're supposed to get a car when you're 16. That was in Toronto. My high school was downtown. I took the subway to school every day. I was like, why do I need a car? I walk to the grocery store. I take a bus to my friend's house. I subway to school. Like, this is my life. And then I went to school in Vancouver, which is also like SkyTrain, buses, walking. I just have never felt a need to, but people get really passionate when I tell them I don't have my license. And so I thought I'd research, why society just, like, they're in love with the idea of their cars and having a license. And to me, it's always just been so weird. Like, why are you so attached to this object that is terrible for the planet?
Yeah.
And takes up so much space and costs so much money. Yeah, why are we all so attached? And then I spent like about 6 months doing research, gathering articles, because my parents are lawyers, so I've learned to have a good defense.
Yep. Cool. So yeah, in the article, you talk a lot about kind of like the history of, I guess, our cultural obsession with cars and automobiles. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you kind of uncovered in your research?
Oh my God, there is so much. I'm like, where to begin? It is interesting because, to summarize it in like one sentence, capitalism, that is really why.
It always
It was
comes back to capitalism.
I want to give society the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's not that much about capitalism, but no, this is 99% about capitalism. There is this 1%, people like the idea of freedom, personal freedom, getting to go where you want to whenever you can. That is a portion of it, but the majority is, we can buy you, we can sell you the car, we can sell you the parts, we're going to sell you the license plate. You have to pay for your license.
Right.
Everything you have to pay for. You have to pay taxes for the highways and then tolls for certain highways. Like, it's all just, how can we create a product that is really very much part of a capitalist society? But it really started, late 1800s, early 1900s, where wealthy people were like, oh, poor people are on the train too now. That sucks. Why don't we just create our own mode of transportation? Because originally it was for wealthy people. It started off as we can get to places faster than you can.
Yeah, and then of course you layer on top of that, like the reason that we have to have cars is also to exist in a capitalist society so that we can get to work, make more money, be more efficient, and all of everything that comes along with that, right?
And it just sucks because, most people that need a car are people that, that work at grocery stores, insurance companies, just like, day-to-day jobs that require you maybe, and then lots of people, they live maybe on the other side of town, and it's also really unfortunate with more work being in person now as well. It's now, I thought I could live over here and have this job. What's gonna happen now?
Right.
And
Commuter culture. Holy heck.
yeah, oh,
I lived in Guelph, so I've lived in Guelph for many years. We moved up north, but before that I was in Guelph, and I worked in Toronto for, I don't know, probably like 5 years, commuting back and forth between Guelph and Toronto. Yeah, and I like at one point I was commuting to Markham. Like and even within Guelph, so a lot of people travel back and forth between Guelph and Kitchener. And now there's a GO train, which is awesome, but for most people, they're still driving. Um, and the notion that people might work in the place that they live, I feel like is no longer a concept that people hold on to at all.
I feel like especially since post-COVID, that's just even more rare,
Yeah.
it seems. And now, yeah, some people have jobs in other parts of the country that require flying as well.
Every time I hear, oh yeah, so and so works in New York, and I'm like, what? Like, yeah, they fly back and forth from New York, and I'm like, why would you ever do that?
Yeah, it's like not only is it your time that I would say you're wasting, in my opinion, commuting, and then also, yeah, like the gas and the energy that goes into all this transportation is obviously, like, I'm not, blaming people. Like, yeah, you got to get to where you got to go, but the
For
fact
sure.
that this is a system that's been created for you, it often just like breaks my heart that
Yeah.
this is where we're at. And as a pedestrian, like, just walking around, sometimes, like, I look at cars, I'm just like, I'm so sorry for you.
I feel the same way. So we lived in the country, I talk about this way too much, but we just relocated back to the city after spending COVID out in the country, and we drove everywhere. You couldn't walk anywhere. There was nowhere to walk. You could go for hikes down the country roads, but like it was like 11 kilometers to the closest store. So it was, you really weren't walking. And I came home and I parked my car and I didn't drive it for 2 weeks. And I started taking the bus and I bought a bike, and like it just, the freedom of the reliance on a vehicle, like the detachment of the need for the vehicle in order to get anything accomplished was so liberating. I find it hard now to get back in the car to go anywhere. But sometimes you have to. Like my parents live in a different city, so I have to get in a car to go see them. And my kids go to forest school on the other side of town, so I've got to drive them there. But I do, I'm not dying on the hill, but I'm climbing this hill to die on. The active transportation is such a game changer that affects so many different pieces, because when you are taking up space as a pedestrian and as a cyclist, it changes the infrastructure needs of your area. But it also means that you're shopping more locally, that you're spending more time in stores that are close to you. And it's bolstering not just like your local economy within your city, but your local economy within your neighborhood.
I like, even just, yeah, like a great example of that is, my friend. It was her birthday, and she was also moving to like a new apartment. And I was like, oh, before I like figure out, what to get, let me just walk around my street and see what stores there are that I've never been into. Let me just walk around, and I got all my gifts for her from local places just 2 blocks away from me. Like basically my neighbors. And yeah, it's so important. Also, as a pedestrian, it's like if you wanna go back, you can just go back. If you're in a car, oh my god, how am I gonna turn left there? Or like, how am I gonna do this weird U-ey?
Oh, especially in Toronto.
Oh my god, if you're on like a highway too, oh my god, I feel bad for people. Life just feels way more in your hands. And yes, buses don't come when you want them to come sometimes. but you'll just get to where you're gonna go when you get to go. And if more people do end up taking the bus, that bus will come on time. It's just not enough people are taking it to make it come on time.
Yeah, for sure.
And also parking, like the amount of time that probably adds. Like I've been waiting for friends at restaurants before for like 20 minutes because they couldn't find parking.
Right? Just circling
And
around looking for places. Yeah.
yeah, and I just schlep.
Yeah. I also find one of the beautiful things that happens when you're moving on your feet or on a bike compared to in a car is that you notice things that are happening around you. It's this like intimate connection that you just don't experience when you're in a vehicle moving, even on a bus, right? Like the birds that fly overhead, like flocks of birds. And I've stopped like in my tracks so many times to like
What?
watch the birds fly over my head. And I'm like, nobody in any car just saw that. They're all just zooming right by.
No, they're probably just like slamming on their brakes, honking at someone, or looking at Google Maps, trying to make sure they're getting to where they're going. But yeah, when you're walking, like my favorite thing to do is in the fall is I like to walk on all the leaves and like hear them break.
Yeah,
That's like so I'll be walking to a weird pace, and it's all these little things that just like it is technically, I guess, mindfulness. So I guess as a pedestrian, we're just constantly doing a form of mindfulness, and I would say probably more at peace
yeah,
than drivers.
yeah. Since I've started walking to work too, I find that there's like it's a beautiful time for meditation to like
Oh,
even disconnect, like mindfulness in like you're putting your feet one in front of the other and you're constantly aware of your surroundings, but you can kind of let your mind wander and drift and consider, big life questions for things. You're listening to Novitas, a podcast featuring stories of post-capitalism. If you're interested in purchasing a copy of the magazine, including Aviva's article, there are limited copies available at www.novitasmag.com, and they're available at a sliding scale pricing. You can also read the stories from the first issue of the magazine as they are released on the website, as well as the Novitas Substack at novitas.substack.com.
especially like yeah, like before work or like before a meeting, it's nice to like also you're letting out energy as you're walking.
Yeah, for sure. I think the health benefits of active transportation are kind of undeniable at this point. Especially as, we spend so much time sitting on our butts in front of computers or in cars or it always feels like I'm sitting waiting for something. So have you found, and maybe it's a harder question because you haven't driven before, but do you find that there's like accommodations that you have to make in order
Yeah,
to prioritize walking?
yeah, I guess like the biggest thing is the weather, when you're a pedestrian, it's, you really definitely do have to bulk up a bit more.
Sure.
Gotta put on, your heat tech and all that. So there's like that requirement, which is still, I would say, cheaper than getting winter tires.
Yes, for sure. When you're like looking for places to live and stuff, is like the proximity to the subway station important for you?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I guess yeah, I've always lived within walking distance to a subway line, even yeah, in Vancouver and in Toronto. So I guess I never lived a life where I had to like take, 2 buses to get to a subway station, which I'm sure for some people is a reality. Um, I mean, I hope one day there's just more subways like, in New York and Paris and London.
Yeah, streetcars too. Like Guelph's pretty good. I have no complaints. You can get around pretty well on the bus. There's certain parts of the city that are hard to reach, but I guess the same is in Toronto as well.
Yeah, I think yeah, no matter the city that you're in, but yes, but in Canada, I would say there's gonna be neighborhoods that just don't have yeah, the TTC just doesn't reach them or whatever transportation system doesn't fully reach them, unfortunately. But I mean, it's only gonna change with increased ridership.
Yeah.
Soon.
realize that it's the same with bike lanes. There's a huge thing in Guelph around the bike lanes. Well, in Toronto too now, right?
Yes.
About removing bike lanes because nobody uses them. And it's
Yeah.
a strange thing. And it is a bit of a chicken and egg situation, right? Because you have to build infrastructure for safe active transportation in order for people to use it. And then there's going to be a period of time where there needs to be room for uptake, for people to make those kinds of transitions. And just simply putting a bike lane sometimes isn't enough.
No, it's the bike lanes in Toronto make me feel so, sad because they're what usually just like lines versus, in Montreal, they have more of a barrier.
Right? The Montreal bike lanes are so amazing. And for anybody who hasn't traveled there, it's like a two-way system that is totally separated from the streets. And it's such a cool experience because you can get places really quickly, and you're not at risk. You don't have to like cross over traffic as much, I find. Anyways, I do remember that when I was there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm like, I mean, I would have to measure or Google this, but I'm sure the roads are roughly the same sizes of our roads. They're just designed differently to fit that.
Yeah.
When people say, "Oh, there's not enough space." Oh, there's space. There is space.
There's space if you're
Cars are the ones taking up the space, guys.
That's true. So I mean, we've touched on this a little bit, but there's a lot of people that get really animated when you suggest to them that they perhaps shouldn't drive a car. And we talked about a couple of the things that people complain about. And this is like, okay, I'm going to go into this a little bit more later. So stay with me here. The lack of access is a major reason why people don't take public transportation or why people rely on a car. And then there's like the accessibility and ableism conversation, which we're going to have in a little bit. But I find that most of the people that give me pushback are totally capable
Yes.
of commuting or getting around without a vehicle. And how do you talk to those people to try and help them understand that, like, there's a real conversation to be had, and there's a lot of implications, some of which we've touched on around like people's reliance on cars for capitalism or personal health benefits. Like, how do you talk to people in a way that I guess they can resonate with?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, fortunately, I feel like most of my friends are like sort of in the same situation as me, just never gotten their license, or maybe they have it or they don't use it. Or I do have some friends that do live more in the suburbs where, I would say just lack of access is more of a thing. So I think I don't have too many people in like my inner circle that are like this. But usually, when I do meet people at my zines fair when I'm selling my zines, people will try and start a bit of an argument with
Oh,
me.
I can never live without my car, right?
I guess usually like I'll say, variation like do you really need it? Like how much does it benefit you? And then obviously like I'll sort of like I guess gauge from there.
Mhm.
Um it's hard because people are just so stubborn. They're just so attached. And it's really hard for people like they're not self-aware to understand.
Okay, so self-awareness is a big piece there, right? Where you have to be real with yourself about what your needs are and what is living beyond those needs.
Exactly. Yeah, I think they just see it as, I turned 16, I got my license, I got a car when I was 18. This is life. Like it's just this like only and I'm sure they're like that in multiple aspects
Sure.
in their life, just very, my way or the highway, literally.
Yes. Can I interrupt for one say
Oh yeah.
and say that I think this is one of the things that's really beautiful about zine culture is because very easily you can present people with ideas that kind of like shake up those notions that they hold to be true. And maybe even even if you're not diving in deep with people around having the conversations about, hey, maybe you don't actually need your car, they can take that zine home with them and read it and think about it and then start to
Yeah.
question internally, is this something that I need or is it living beyond what I actually need?
No, I totally agree. I remember in school, we had to create your artist statement, like, and the reason why I'm a designer is like I want to create a positive change in the world. And obviously, as a designer, we don't have that much governmental impact. But yeah, at least I can do is help change people's minds, and then that can help change the way people vote, hopefully, and then that can then lead to infrastructure change.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I am a firm believer that the cultural shift needs to happen before the political shift will.
Yeah.
And so the more people are opening up their eyes to like changing the way that they live, understanding that, there's certain aspects of their life that is causing harm. And like, let's be real, driving cars everywhere all the time is causing a lot of harm in a lot of
Yeah.
different ways. So, putting out the little message into the world, whether it's through artistic medium or through a magazine or through, whatever, a podcast to help people question that kind of thing and start to make those little cultural shifts is a very important
It's
work.
vital because like, why would our city, like, why would they think, "Oh, we need more bike lanes," if no one's telling, like, if not enough people are telling them that they need bike lanes? So unless a large enough group of people want something, it's just not gonna happen.
Yep, for sure. I said I was going to come back to this, and I'm going to come back to it now because this is, I think, a hard conversation and one that I have had with people multiple times. And I find that often in our left-leaning communities, we get bogged down with this idea that if something is not accessible to everybody, that means that it's not a solution.
Mm, yeah.
And there is like, when we're talking about active transportation and not being reliant on a car, there are real barriers that people face, that a lot of people face, whether it's physical accessibility, whether it's proximity to a grocery store. These are real issues. But I get caught up often because people will say, well, not everybody can walk or not everybody can ride a bike.
Yeah.
And for me, my rebuttal is always, but that doesn't mean that you can't.
Yeah, with disability issues, people are in, wheelchairs or have other disability or accessibility issues. I mean, and then we have people that don't live near things. Yeah, there is not much of a solution there.
And like this is something that we've touched on the podcast before, is that we are stuck in the system, right? We are still living in a world where active transportation isn't prioritized, and most people assume that you have a car or access to a car to get around, which means that there are going to be barriers for a lot of people. But that doesn't mean that we should give up on it entirely.
No, exactly. Like, I think it just comes down to where we're just little players in this big system that is not on our side. Um, Doing what you can and starting these conversations to start change. If you have a friend that can take the bus, but they're constantly just Ubering or taking cars, like, call them out on it. Yeah.
There's a lot there too, like inviting other people to do things together, right? And I wonder about the conversation around folks who are not able-bodied being able to access public transportation. I think there's a real need for us to come together and rely on community in order to do these things together. So if, you're not able to get to the grocery store, but you have a neighbor who is, working together to find an arrangement that works well for both of you is another alternative as well, where we can support each other.
Such a good idea. And I think a big part of being a pedestrian is realizing you are one. Like, you're literally walking with a group of people. But when you're in your car, you're just sort of, there's you can't help, and there's no one there to help you.
If there was a world where active transportation was prioritized, what do you think that would look like, and what do you think it might change?
Oh my god. It just makes me so happy to think about. I have to just, like, exhale in the happiness of the thought. Um, I think it would affect every bit of society. Like, let's say, for example, I live off of Bathurst Street. Let's say there was just, like, no roads there. It was just all a sidewalk. There was, like, cyclists going around, sort of like how Mile End in Montreal happens in the summer. They close it off. What if, that was just permanently Bathurst Street? Like, how would the environment change? I think we'd see more animals. We would see community gardens. We would see families and mothers, and kids out and about more, probably seeing each other more. I think we would just see, I think in this, I know we're like living in this epidemic of like loneliness. I think that would be huge, as local businesses would just do so much better because they wouldn't have to worry about having parking. They could just, be and have people come in whenever. I think would just be a happier society.
Thanks for listening to the Novitas podcast, and a huge thank you to Aviva Davis for sharing her thoughts and experiences on this episode. If you're interested in supporting this podcast, please consider becoming a paid subscriber on the Substack at novitas.substack.com. No content is ever paywalled, and this podcast has zero funding, so I'm always grateful for your support. You can check out all of last season's episodes on the website at novitasmag.com.